future of healthcare has arrived. Artificial intelligence and machine learning are transforming the practice of medicine and improving patient outcomes. This is Smarter Healthcare with AI. Conversations with Dr. Hassan Tetteh as he shares insights into the healthcare of tomorrow and how we can help create it today.
Today, I'm joined by Amy Brown, the founder and CEO of Authenticx. Amy spent decades as a healthcare executive advocating for underserved populations before founding Authenticx in 2018. Authenticx analyzes patient voices at scale, revealing opportunities to improve healthcare. With her revolutionary platform, Amy is bringing the authentic patient voice into the boardroom to drive better outcomes. Amy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Tetteh, for having me. It's an honor.
Yeah, so you have had a very, very amazing career. You've done a lot of things and held leadership in so many different roles. But let's talk about what motivated you to start Authenticx, because it's a really interesting company. Your mission is amazing, and it really just aligns with how you are leveraging. You're a prime example of how you're leveraging AI to deliver better healthcare and to empower patients. So tell us about that.
You know, I have an interesting lead up to the founding of Authenticx, and it really is an expression. The company is my expression of my response to 20 years of working in the healthcare system. You know, I started the daughter of a physician who helped to bring me along and see from his perspective, you know, what patient care looked like. And I admired him firsthand as he served patients. And then, you know, I decided not to pursue clinical career, but I ended up getting my education in macro social work. I really cared about systems of care and started my career then in state government working on Medicaid policy and working with underserved populations. Then jumped into the private sector and worked with Medicare, Medicaid, commercial health plans, always in operations roles. And over 20 years of doing that work, I came to see a few things. The first was I saw firsthand the administrative waste that our health system has developed over the years. I saw a lot of missed opportunities to connect the clinical side of healthcare with what's going on the administrative side. And in my roles as a contact center leader or a call center leader, I realized that the story of the breakdown in patient care could be told through the millions of customer conversations that were being transacted and facilitated by the healthcare enterprise. And so I left my career, you know, when I was 42 years old, mom of 4 kids, husband, stay-at-home dad. And I just said, you know, I'm not going to die happy if I don't try to solve this problem or at least make a dent in it. And so that's kind of the backstory behind Authenticx.
Wow. And, you know, your perspective is a very unique one because, as you said, being in this sort of pilot seat of administrivia for the hospital, the engagement, and of course, you know, leading call centers where that's really the front door, right, for a lot of patients. When they're getting an appointment, they're just trying to get information. They're trying to navigate a complex, very disorganized infrastructure and just system, and oftentimes with a lot of anxiety and a lot of questions. And yet, I would argue we don't do a very good job of facilitating that very unique time in a patient's sort of journey, you know, sort of to connect them with, you know, will ultimately hopefully help them and then bring them some ease and comfort at a time of need. So what is it that Authenticx does, and how are you, you know, on the ground addressing, you know, that problem as well as others?
Yes. So we view recorded customer conversation data as being a kind of a lost source of insight that the healthcare system desperately needs to listen to. There's a lot of patient experience effort and resource being spent on surveying patients and customers, on building customer journeys. But if we're not leveraging the literal customer voices that are flowing into our billing lines, our customer service, our scheduling, our nurse triage lines. If we're not leveraging those recorded conversations, then we're missing a really important and rich source of insight. And so what Authenticx does is we work with healthcare companies, that includes hospital and health systems, health insurers, and pharmaceutical companies. We work with them to take in their conversation data into our platform. We use AI to think of it as like AI ears that can listen to 100% of your customer conversations, and then digest and succinctly tell the story back to the health companies we work with about what is going on in these customer conversations that are causing friction, are causing patients to lapse in therapy or care, to drop out of the care plan. And it's really about connecting that administrative side of the business with the clinical care side of the business. I think historically, healthcare organizations think of their administrative side of customer service as being separate and distinct from the clinical care. And what we know from listening, and we listened to 250 million customer conversations last year, we know that in those administrative conversations, customers, patients, caregivers are telling their story about the clinical experience, about how difficult it is to navigate care, and why they're dropping out of care or can't get access to care. We've made so much of a big deal in this country about social determinants of health and how that impacts. Well, we got to look at ourselves in the mirror and say, well, how are we contributing to the gaps in care just by our own processes and systems? And that's what we're trying to solve, is to help shine a light on those problems that are solvable if we just listen to the data that's right under our nose.
So that's amazing. So you are actually using these 250 million conversations, listening, with the empathetic air of AI, which will listen forever to any conversation, interpret it, and then get insight from that. So from those 250 million conversations of this articulation of the patient's frustration, sometimes their story, their journey, their engagement with the healthcare system, and truly all encompassing their experience, their patient experience, what insights have you gained, not only for the work you're doing in Authenticx to better inform how you can help your clients, but what kind of insights have you gained that have been helpful for the organizations that you serve now?
At a high level, what we have learned is that the system itself is crushingly complex for consumers to navigate. And when you distill it down to individual organizations or even individual kind of lines of business where organizations have organized workforces to help serve a particular purpose in the customer journey, our clients are able to use our platform, our product, to really define what are the root cause drivers of patient friction. What is driving patients to disenroll from our program, from them to say, hey, I'm not going to go to my follow-up visits, or hey, I'm not going to fill this prescription even though my doctor prescribed it. We're getting to the root reasons for that, quantifying that at scale. So now we have a universe of data. This is no longer anecdotal. This is no longer, just the fraction of customers that are responding to surveys. We have the universe of data where we can quantify what pain points are driving the biggest volume of issues. We can even tie that to dollars spent by the health system in trying to resolve those issues. And then what we're seeing leaders do is take this data to go inform their action plans and their strategy to kind of unstick their patient journey. And we're seeing those clients who are listening reduce their call volume on pain point issues, redeploy their nurses to actually answering nurse level questions versus administrative questions. And we're definitely seeing some positive movement in the health system of the things that they can do to resolve patient friction.
So you must have a lot of stories to share. Do you have one that just really resonates and is emblematic of why I'm sure you've gone into this work and why you're so passionately pursuing the mission of Authenticx?
Yes. So one of my favorite stories is of a nurse triage line that a hospital system had set up, to help answer questions in between clinical visits. And we were listening at scale to 100% of them. And one of the cool things when you're listening on an ongoing basis is you can see when topics or issues are trending up at a macro view. And so with this one health system, we noticed, our platform noticed a rise in the number of kind of distressed callers around the access to mental health care. And when diving into that subset of conversations, we could see that these were parents who were calling on behalf of their children during the COVID crisis and right after the COVID crisis. Were desperately in need of mental health care. And these nurses were just kind of, as the calls were coming in, were trying to respond. But what really needed to happen is the next layer up of leadership needed to understand the quantity and the severity of the curve in terms of the need. Once they realized that, they were able to wrap their arms around a more systemic response to that patient population. They were able to organize a coalition of providers internally and respond more effectively. And that was, as you know, like the COVID crisis created so many problems on the mental health care side of things. And that was one of my favorite responses that was able to be pulled together just from the act of using AI to listen.
Yeah. And so from that one example, you're really showing how those voices, listening to those voices, gaining insight from those voices, help to amplify the patient perspective collectively, right? In this case, a community of concerned parents at a time that society was going through something that was, obviously very stressful, but it also informed the health system to innovate, real time to address a problem and hopefully do it more efficiently. And it sounds like they were able to rise to that.
That's exactly right. I love the way you put that. It allowed the system to innovate. And I do think that's at the heart of why you listen, right? So that you can understand reality and do something about it in a way that is responsive, right?
Absolutely. So what kind of reactions have you got from your clients? Because, it's one thing to say, we're going to give you this information, all right? But in many ways, you're capturing hopefully some good stories and some good engagements, but you're also probably capturing quite a bit of frustration, quite a bit of angst, and sometimes a little bit of dissatisfaction. And so when you reflect that to the leaders and to the folks at the organizations that are, engaging with you to give them this insight, how has that been received?
Yeah, well, I've learned a lot from my own mistakes. When I started this business and started, being able to listen at scale, when I first started engaging with clients to kind of show them, I was like, oh, I'm going to go in and share some truth bombs, and they're going to be so excited to receive these truth bombs. And I learned like, wow, this is really exposing information. Now, it's their own data that they have, so it's not like I'm getting it from some other source. But it is hard. And I think it takes really strong cultures within these systems to be able to receive challenging information. So I've certainly learned a lot about how to prepare clients for what they're going to hear. And also I would tell you, and you alluded to this, there's always really positive stories that would otherwise never be heard, right? Because they're just going from the mouth of a customer into a customer service representative's ear, and that customer service representative is taking 60 calls, and their job is to get on to the next call. But in that moment, there's a very human exchange where that patient is being helped, right? And what we've seen happen with organizations who use listening at scale as a tactic and a strategy, they're using those good stories to inspire their entire workforce. I don't care if you're in auditing or back office or front office or you're a clinician or not, everybody gets out of bed because they want to help someone, right? And so you can use these voices and these stories to help inspire an entire culture. And we're seeing organizations do that.
Wow. So of course, this begs the question, many questions, as you're gathering this information, right? The ability and I guess the tools, dare I say, that are available to us now to access information, especially at call centers, right? We have chatbots, we have, artificial intelligence, of course, that you're using for the analytics part. Have you experimented? Have you delved into? Are there plans to also employ artificial intelligence to actually be on the receiving end of the listening and not just recording in analytics, but actually be the body or the agent, if you will, that engages with the caller and the customer, the patient, the client that's engaging with the organization?
Certainly, there are a lot of companies that are trying to solve that problem of essentially taking the human out of the interaction and having a bot do that. And there's a lot of innovators who are focused on solving a problem of human workforce limitations or capacity. For us, our focus is on the so what of the exchange and making sense of that exchange, regardless of if it's the customer to a bot or the customer to a human representative. Either way, there is content in that conversation that is important for the health system deploying these technologies to learn and listen and understand and continually evolve from. So that's the problem we're focused on. Now, we do use generative AI and bots, if you want to call them that, in our product to tell the user of our product, hey, here's what's happening in your conversations, and here's what you should potentially think about doing as a response. And so we are deploying that type of technology. We're not in the business of trying to replace the human agent. It's more about listening to the unstructured conversation itself.
Sure. Now, when the patients are calling in and they're engaging with the customer service agent on the other end of the organization, the representative of the organization, this exchange and this, like you said, this dynamic conversation that's happening, this exchange back and forth, obviously it's being recorded. Have there been any issues? Have the organizations raised anything? Have patients said, hey, I didn't know, or how are you using this conversation? How are you using this information? I would just venture to wonder, how do the patients feel? Because you wonder if that dynamic or that exchange, is just changed and it's not as organic if people know that they're being recorded.
Well, 100% of the conversations that we ingest have been given a disclaimer to the customer that the call is being recorded for quality and monitoring purposes, which is the purpose of our product, is monitoring the quality of the exchange and providing feedback to the organization. Our product is never used to market directly to consumers. Given the insight, it's really intended for businesses to understand the business problems that they've created for their customers. And so the AI models that we've built over time are to help identify risk for the business. An example of that is, we work with pharmaceutical manufacturers, and one of the things that the FDA regulates is making sure that any adverse event that a patient experiences on a therapy that they report is identified and reported back to the FDA. So we have an AI model, for example, that is looking for examples of patients who have reported an adverse event, but the company missed it. And so we actually are helping keep healthcare organizations compliant to HIPAA or to adverse event reporting or quality of care reporting.
And has there been any thoughts from your organizations that you support on how they would like to receive the information? Because as you mentioned, you learned somewhat early on that maybe they don't need to deliver to them in the, hey, look at what's wrong with your system and the organization and the processes and sort of procedures you put in place. I guess what I'm asking is how have you found the organization most receptive to receiving the insights that you gain from these conversations, this very important information that you are gathering and analyzing it and providing as insight? Is it through that bot in that chat that you said? Is it in a visual of like a slide deck that says, hey, this department here needs some work, or this service line here is doing great, but this one here is not doing so well? Yeah, how is that information best received and digested or ingested at the organization? What's been your experience?
Well, our clients have licenses to go directly into our product, and we have dashboards set up for particular roles and permissions, et cetera. We have users that are at the C-suite level. We have users that are at the agent level and everything in between. And so we have built out a user experience that is relative to their particular role. But one thing that we found that is really critical to the receptiveness of this data is, and I do think this is a differentiator for us. Every SaaS company has dashboards and reporting. And what we found through trials and tribulations is that seeing a dashboard for a leader doesn't really, you can see that your customer complaints are trending, but that doesn't really have an impact in your gut. You see it up in your cognitive brain, but you don't hear it or feel it in your gut. And so we created a feature called the call montage feature. And what it does is it looks at all the conversations and it finds the segments of the conversations that have been tagged or labeled with that frustrating comment or that complaint. And they're able to be compiled like an old school mixtape or like your Spotify playlist. And as a leader now, I can go in and I can say, I want to hear what yesterday's complaint sounded like. And instead of having to hunt through my telephony platform, I can see the graph that tells me, okay, it was about 20% of my customers yesterday were complaining. Now I'm going to click through my montage library and I'm going to listen to samples of what that really sounds like. And what we found is that the marriage of visualized, quantified data with the literal patient voice is what is driving people to act within their organizations. And I think that's a really important finding that we've had. And there's something human about connecting. If you're a C-suite and you hardly ever touch or feel or get around your patients, when you can connect with them, it makes you want to act, right? And the data comes to life in the human form and you can't unhear it anymore, right? And so that's been a really important way we have delivered data and insights that are moving the needle.
Yeah, it literally moving the needle. I was going to say that marrying of you, as you mentioned, this sort of union of the voice of the patient with the data point, it must invoke, and it sounds like it does, this visceral response of like, oh my gosh, that could be my mom, that could be my sister, that could be my wife, that could be my daughter. And that's how they're feeling when they're engaging with my organization that I lead, that I have influence over. I can't help but think that must be very compelling and moves people to action, or at least a much more visceral response than just looking at a vanilla dashboard with a data point that's anonymous.
Exactly right. You got it.
Wow, that's very powerful. And on that note, let's press pause. But coming up next time on Smarter Healthcare with AI, Amy will share some of the trends she is seeing on the organizational side of healthcare.
What I see is this kind of tension of all of these competing pressures on the healthcare system. And I think there needs to be a little bit more discernment and thoughtfulness around how should we think about AI as solving a problem? What do we want our patient experience to look like? Do we want it to feel human? Do we want it to be in tech enabled? What problems can tech actually help us solve? And where do we want humans to supplement? There's not enough thought being put into that. I think there's an expectation that AI is going to solve all of our problems. And the reality is, it's not.
This has been Smarter Healthcare with AI. If you'd like to find out how to bridge the gap between medical experts and tech innovators and discover how AI can make us healthier and more human, go to Tetteh.com. Smarter Healthcare with AI with Dr. Hassan Tetteh is a production of Forbes Books.